bring our bowl this morning. Please let the vibrations bring you into the quiet of our sanctuary.
Any Bruce Coburn fans? One, two, sure. I'll play a couple of Bruce Coburn songs today. If you know him, you know that he's mostly a poet who sings along with his poetry. Standing on the bridge before the cavern of light, darkness alive with possibility. Nose to this wind full of twinkling lights, trying to catch the scent of what's coming to be in this world of wonders. World of wonders. World of wonders, world of wonders. Somewhere a saxophone slides through changes, like a wet pipe dripping down my neck. Gives me a chill, sounds like danger. I can't stop moving till I cross this sector in this world of wonder. World of wonder. World of wonder. World of wonder. There's a rainbow shining in a bead of spittle, falling diamonds in a rattling rain. Light flexed on moving muscle. I stand here dazzled with my heart in flames in this world of wonder. World of wonders. World of wonders. World of wonders. Moment of peace like brief Arctic bloom. Red gold ripple of the sun going down. Line of black hills makes my bed. Sky full of love pulled over my head in this world of wonders. World of wonders. World of wonders. World of wonders.
Thank you, Philip. Good morning, and welcome to our sanctuary, where we invite you to explore your own spiritual path. This is a place where we encourage diversity and where we invite conversation. We come here to be reminded of and to practice standing on the side of love, peace, and compassion. Welcome visitors and friends and members. Thank you all for coming to listen and share with each other. May you find wisdom in our words this morning and friendship in our community. I am happy to share that Michael Casey and Philip Dutton will be accompanying our music today, and our own Sue Browning will share her sermon entitled Lessons of Perspective. I have one announcement this morning. I think I left it. Today is the deadline for accepting items for the yard sale, and for the silent auction. So if you have anything that you haven't brought in or that you want to make sure the group knows about, please make sure you email them or bring those items after church today. And to those who have already donated, thank you so much. All right, we are going to say the chalice lighting words that we shared last week. They're different than our regular ones, but they fit our service today really nicely. So if you will refer to the chalice lighting words in your order of service.
I got it.
I invite you to share in these words. Out of the earth rises light. Out of the earth rises life. Out of the earth rises spring and resurrection. May this flaming chalice remind us to revere all that is life and that which calls us forth in creativity and love. Hallelujah. Our opening hymn is For the Beauty of the Earth, hymn number 21. I invite you to rise and embody your spirit. know it's not Earth Day, but this is the date that worked for us, so we're having Earth Day today. Kim and I have some opening words, and I'm thinking, Kim, once we get to the alternating part, maybe that might work. So Earth Day began in 1970 to honor the Earth and also to honor concepts of peace. People debated, even back then, what were we going to call it? For some reason they settled that it should begin with an E. They looked at Ecology Day, Environmental Day, and they ended up with Earth Day. But there was also concerns back then. The Vietnam War was going on, there were civil rights discussions, and people were concerned that this would be a distraction rather than something integral to the same conversations. Today I want to think about Earth Day, this 53 years later, as about paying attention to our planet. We talk about honoring our planet. We've got a lot of conversations on policy and climate change, and we'll touch a bit on some of that. But are we paying attention? Because that was part of the message. It was about changing behavior then and changing policy. And there were groups that believed that if you lived lives in voluntary simplicity, all would be well. How many people had a whole Earth catalog? How many know what a whole Earth catalog is? That was way more hands than one might guess. So today our service is this paying attention message, and often we use our services, our worship services, to try to get the perspective of someone else. We try to put ourselves in the shoes of another person. What might we learn? We think, if we could just stand over here, just be over there. But how about if we take it a step further today? What if the other we're picturing is the experience of non-human animals? It's harder than you think, and a lot of what we're doing in the service today relies on a book by a guy named Ed Young, who wrote this book, An Immense World, and it goes through in detail different ways different animals do things. And he notes this: we tend to frame what we think an animal's life is like based on how we sense things, based on our five senses rather than theirs. It's all we know. And yet their way of taking in the world, the non-human animals, varies greatly from ours. I'm going to start with a few examples.
So, perhaps you know that a dolphin locates distance or invisible objects through a process called echolocation, where he's sending out sound waves that bounce back to give him information about the world. They can even perceive not only, for example, the human's outer shape, but also what's inside, including their skeleton and their lungs, almost like an X-ray through this process.
There are tree frog embryos that if the embryo is inside of the frog and the frog is attacked by a predator, they release an enzyme that releases themselves from the frog's body to escape.
Sea turtles. Who doesn't love a sea turtle? They migrate. They migrate away from their birthplace when they're very, very small, and they migrate back when they're ready to lay their eggs. And they use the Earth's magnetic field as a guide. They can sense that magnetic field, and it guides them back to their small island after traveling potentially 1,200 miles away.
And our final example, think about a zebra. First thing you think about zebras, they're striped. For ages, people thought, I don't know if this was a Darwin hypothesis, but that zebras' coloring must either protect them or do something for them in the natural environment. It turns out the predators that go after them only see a gray blob. They can't see the distinct colors in a zebra. Eyesight is one of the amazing things that humans, the only creatures that probably have sharper eyesight than we do, at least during the day, are the raptors, the eagles, and the different folks. Virtually every other animal sees at way less resolution than we do. Different versions of color. And this book goes on and on about all different things. How many eyes a scallop has. All the different ways that you might think of it. The folks that go after zebras are probably legally bound by virtually every standard of human measurement. But that's if you measure it during the day. A lot of animals do better in dim light. They can see two different things sometimes at once. And they do think the zebras, probably the stripes, are to protect them from certain types of bugs and bites, because they do better than horses with certain types of fleas that bite them. So how might we be changed? How might we imagine new ways to care for the planet if we decenter ourselves in the story? So those are our opening words, and I invite us now, we're going to move into a time of reflection, and we're going to use the responsive reading that is in your order of service. Kim found this for us. For folks that don't know, Kim, I'm not a scientist, I don't even play one. Kim actually teaches biology. So this has been a long passion of hers to think about the environment and to help lead our congregation through our Green Sanctuary movement. I'll offer the words that are in the regular type, and I invite the congregation to respond in the bold type. We have forgotten who we are. We have alienated ourselves from the unfolding of the cosmos. We have become estranged from the movements of the earth. We have turned our backs on the cycles of life. We have forgotten who we are. We have sought only our own security. We have exploited simply for our own ends. We have distorted our knowledge. We have abused our power. We have forgotten who we are. Now the land is barren, and the waters are poisoned, and the air is polluted. We have forgotten who we are. Now the forests are dying, and the creatures are disappearing, and the humans are despairing. We have forgotten who we are. We ask forgiveness. We ask for the gift of remembering. We ask for the strength to change. We have forgotten who we are. Let's just take some time in silence to imagine ourselves part of something greater, part of this planet, part of the cosmos. For the many ways we care for the planet, for the ways we take time of gentleness toward one another, for the many ways our lives are interconnected. We hold our community and we hold the world in love. One of the ways we make this visible each week is through our joys and sorrows, our times of concern in the world. I invite Kim to lead us through our joys and concerns. Move all this paper so we don't get confused.
Now I invite you to come forward and share if you have a joy or if you have a sorrow that you would like to share. And as you do, I will light a candle for you and place it in our sand bowl. And if you'll use the microphone there in front. Yay.
This is my first time back for 6 weeks, or February or something, but anyway, I missed you so much. And so appreciate all the love and TLC you all sent me, and cards and phone calls and emails. So thank you, and I'm so happy to be back.
Microphone, please.
Okay, I'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. McElfee for these boats that they made us. They're really amazing. Thank you so much.
I think what Linda mentioned last week, our friend Ancilla Matthews died. And maybe she told you the story, but Anna came to stay with our family when Linda's mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she lived with us for 6 months until Phyllis died. And she became a grandmother to us all. She's from Trinidad, and we ended up, actually went back to visit, took our kids down there at Christmas one year and had Christmas with her and her family. But on Thursday, her funeral, and they had it at her home, and they live streamed on YouTube, and there were over 50 people viewing from the United States and all over, who knows where. But it just struck me. They brought this simple casket up to her home in the yard right there at her house, and they opened it up, and I mean, the love for her was just so special. They touched her, they cried over her, they laughed about her, and then we go to the cemetery, and the hole is hand dug, and they opened the casket again for everybody to look at her again, and they put roses inside, and said goodbye, and lowered her, and then they started filling the hole up, and the people stood around and sang hymns until that entire hole was filled and covered, and then they put the flowers on the top. And it's, I don't know, we're missing something. I think it was such a beautiful thing when we, close caskets and cremate. I mean, I don't have a problem with cremation, but I mean, there was just it seemed like there's something missing with this saying goodbye to death and to someone and all that. But it was a beautiful thing. I just wanted to share it.
I'm thinking this morning about my nephew Sean and his son Braden, who are both struggling with mental health issues. And they're here in Florida. My sister, my oldest sister Beth is mom and grandma to them. So she's been telling me a little bit about their struggles. So just, keep in your thoughts. And for anyone who struggles with mental health, I can share.
Well, I have two. My 17-year-old granddaughter Ella will be competing later today at the National Championship for synchronized swim teams, and her group of 4 that qualified made finals. And they won't win, but she's just so excited, and I wish her luck and proud of all her dedication. And her cousin, my 17-year-old granddaughter Grace, just broke up with her first real boyfriend, and it just brought back all the memories of the angst of being a teenager and first love, and it's a hard world out there. Anyway.
My joy is to thank my cat for bringing me into this wonderful congregation. I was never much of a churchgoer before, and everybody's heard the story about my cat, so I ended up here, and it's the most pleasant place I've ever been in my life. For 1 solid hour, I get to see people, greet people, meet people that I've never met before, and see their smiles on their faces. That's hard to come by anymore, you know, and to just hear the love that's in the rooms, to hear Sue speak, to hear the pianist play. I mean, what a better way to start a Sunday out, you know, whether it's sunny out, rainy, or whatever the conditions are. I am so truly happy for my life today and the people that I've met in these rooms. And I'll just keep coming back. Thank you.
This candles.
Thanks.
For all those that shared today, and for all those that are holding a celebration or sorrow in your heart, may we keep our candles lit through our service to remind us to hold all in our prayers and meditations. And we'll take a moment of silence. Amen. And now we'll have the offering this morning to support the good works of our church.
Lovers
Thank you all for your generosity of time and spirit and income. May we continue to reach out for social and environmental justice in the world. Amen. So I'm gonna introduce Sue's sermon this morning with a little reflection of my own. As many of you know, I teach environmental science in the high school. Nature is my first and true love, and why I went into teaching really to begin with, to share this. One of the main themes of my class is to show students how they are connected to their own ecosystem and how their survival and our survival really relies on the health and the sustainability of the ecosystem. Ecosystem health and sustainability is wrapped up in what we know as biodiversity, the variety of life in our natural world. All species rely on other species for survival, whether through their feeding relationships or through their symbiotic relationships of cooperation among species, and there are many. Without biodiversity, disease, nutrient depletion, and competition run rampant and degrade the community on so many levels. We've all heard stories of civilization demise due to environmental degradation, which leads to family degradation and community degradation and loss. In our service today, we're trying to open our eyes to some of the differences in the way species perceive the world in order to better understand the miraculous nature of biodiversity. And with this in mind, I have a story to tell. So there's a phenomenon in nature studies called a trophic cascade, and perhaps some of you have heard of that. This is essentially the idea of a ripple effect of one organism on the broader community of life. You might even think of this organism as a keystone species. They are key to the health and sustainability of that ecosystem. Key to balance. Wolves are one of those species. Years ago, wolves were actually exterminated from the Yellowstone National Park. Those who supported and did the exterminating would say it was because wolves are a danger to humans, but in reality it was because wolves are competitors of humans, I would propose. They were gone from the ecosystem for about 75 years, and during that time the ecosystem suffered dramatically. And if you've ever been to Yellowstone Park or you know anything about it, it's very large. It has, I believe it's the Colorado River that flows through it. Most people did not understand why this was happening, but ecologists did. Biodiversity in this system was damaged during this time because elk, who are ravenous grazers, had free range of all the areas. That seems good for the elk until you understand that through their grazing, changed the plant life in the broader area. This changed the habitat for many other species, and so they left. The sheer numbers of elk, what did I say here? It wasn't actually the sheer number of elk that was the problem, but that they had nothing to deter them from roaming everywhere and eating everything. They grazed everything to a nub. When wolves were reintroduced to the park a number of years later, they hunted elk, of course, and that was a predator-prey balancing. But the bigger thing was that it created wariness in the elk. And so there were certain areas that they didn't go to very much, or if they went there, they didn't stay and graze. So elk no longer grazed in areas where they might be trapped. Plant life in those areas was able to recover and flourish. As the plant life flourished, the birds and the smaller animals came back. As the birds and smaller animals returned, so did some of the larger predators and medium-sized predators. As trees and shrubs began to thrive again, the soil became stable, which allowed the river to be healthier. And thus aquatic organisms began to thrive as well. The entire ecosystem began to recover and flourish because the wolves had an important role to play. Each organism has a role to play in the community, and we all need each other to survive, even if we're not directly connected. In my understanding of Native American culture, when they speak of peoples, they are not only referring to humans, but other species as well. And so I want to leave you with this quote from Wendell Berry, who's an author, and ask that when you consider this quote, think of peoples as species. From Wendell Berry. A community is the mental and spiritual condition of knowing that the place is shared, and that the people who share the place define and limit the possibilities of each other's lives. It is the knowledge that people have each other, their concern for each other, their trust in each other, and their freedom to come and go amongst each other. And that creates sustainability. And now, Soon is going to continue our lessons in perspectives today.
She said she was going to use that size. I'm going to trip over each other. So thank you, Kim. It's just amazing when we think of community and we think of the various miraculous connections. And what it feels like is a bit of a puzzle piece, because right now, climate change is this big, onerous, amorphous thing that we can't quite get our arms around. And I don't think we ever will in that sense. But when we lift the principles of community and we lift the principles of interconnection and we do so with reverence, that might be how we approach Earth Day in 2023. I was thinking back, I was in 8th grade at the first Earth Day, and it was a blip at best. But what I do remember, if I was going to think about what did it mean to be at Earth Day, I was not at anything or they told me about it, it was about needing to remember that pollution was bad. Air pollution and water pollution were bad and both did harm. And these messages seemed consistent with all the pictures we were seeing. The smog in LA. I didn't live in LA, but remember how many pictures they would show us over and over, that smog in LA and Lake Erie on fire. Didn't live in Ohio, but somehow I knew Lake Erie was on fire. What I remember was that we were called to fix pollution together, and the fixes were about restricting chemicals and sewage from going into the water. And the biggest culprit, if we wanted to pick a real enemy, it would be those factories over there. Well, eventually our cars got, and I actually looked this up, I remembered it, but it was actually correct, it was in the 1970s, we got catalytic converters. Remember, I never knew what it was, but your car would have a catalytic converter. And then to really solve all problems, we stopped using aerosol deodorant. Remember that? And that was because the fluorocarbons we found were damaging the ozone layer. And Earth Day was a lot about defining an enemy. And there was this confidence, this sort of Walt Whitman, we can do it, we can defeat it. And there was a lot of legislation passed, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, wildlife protection. But the model we were in, I don't think serves us as well anymore. We were in the process of name a problem, fix a problem. Name a problem, fix a problem, and we just had some confidence we could do it. Well, people then started talking more about our relationship to the community, our relationship to the animals, and people were called tree huggers. Remember when that phrase came into vogue? It was sort of a disparaging way to talk about those who worried about the environment. Some people thought it was just a way to talk about Unitarians, but that's how it went. Because some thought the problems were getting overblown. It wasn't as much a common enemy. And some folks also changed behaviors. People became vegetarians, and we started using the phrase, save the planet. Again, this heroic mindset. Efforts were being made to see connections, and efforts were being mocked. And so the approach started blowing up. I think we wanted to have sort of a capitalist solution to a capitalist cause issue, and in some place around 2000, something started becoming disconnected, and the language was changing because we understood the challenges differently. We started talking about global warming. We started talking about green energy and green jobs. And for me, there was some sort of a jump. When we finally got to something called climate change, there was this new level of threat to our existence. There was an effort to put some fear, some very well-warranted fear, into survival. The existence of our own survival is being challenged now, as is all of the diversity that Kim was talking about. And there's many studying the risks. I'm sure many here have watched at least one National Geographic special or two that shows you melting polar ice caps and shows you the problem. And I don't have to defend it here, but the reality check is when you put 8 billion people on a planet and they all use resources, there's problems. So whatever we know, this climate change feels so big and irreversible, and it feels, well, way bigger than pollution. But what of today? What if today, for our Earth Day 2023, we use some of that lessons from that book that Kim and I mentioned earlier, The Immense World? Because one of the concepts, this guy, he's in his 40s, he's a writer, he's actually from Malaysia. He's a fascinating guy, he's won Pulitzer Prizes for these books. Is he talks about a concept of Umwelt, which I'm probably saying it wrong, it's a German phrase, but it says, think about what an animal perceives and recognize that and imagine from that perspective. He describes it this way: for each species, Umwelt is tailored to its own particular needs. So the bubble that the creature is in is tailored to its own needs, and that is contrary to how we usually think about it. You can see, because we think that everybody's experiencing the human way, we make choices that do more harm than we even possibly realize. There's a strong tendency, he says, to anthropomorphize other creatures and to assume they sense the world in the same way we do. And to the extent that we know they don't, we tend only to value it when they exceed what we think they're capable of. We're like, oh, that's amazing, look, they can do that. It's taken billions of years for the adaptive process to bring us to where we are. The book has just millions and millions of examples, but it's complex and we interface in ways and we don't understand in different ways what exactly we're harming. But what if we use that to picture the problem in new ways? The author was interviewed about what he hopes people will take away from this book, and he comes down to 3 things. They're good lessons for us to start with today. First, he asked us to understand the complexity and details of nature and to realize it is humbling. Humility. It is humbling. We only get to see and feel a small part of what's being perceived. Things are going on all over the place that we have no idea about, just to even honor that we don't know it all. Puts us in a place of humility and lets us see that we have less control than we may think. I think there's another lesson there. What can we learn about the perspectives of others? If we suspend our assumptions around what animals feel and do, what about when we interface with other people? That same practice of suspending assumptions and assuming that our own internal view is not the only view is a key lesson. The second lesson, he said, is, first one was sort of humbling, the next one is relative, is honor the wonder and magic of it all. No one is smart enough to have designed all of this. And that's not a statement about God or anything else. It's just amazing. I doubt Darwin had any idea that people would study the details they have and to understand in such creative ways what's going on at the bottom. How do you know if a fish is deaf? And they come up with 75 experiments. Most insects are deaf. All sorts of things that you would not expect. We do harm by neglecting it, but when we think of the awe and the magic, there is something there. What's interesting about his third takeaway is it brings me full circle. It asks us to think about another type of pollution. He invites us to do less harm by saving the quiet and preserving the dark. When he does all these work with all these animals that have adapted, they haven't adapted to 60-story buildings in the middle of cities. They bump into them. Birds with windows, different ways that a lot of animals are harmed by how much light we put into the world and how much noise. And what's amazing with this, he said, is it is a lot easier to address some of the issues of light and sound than it is all the chemicals in the sewage. You can turn lights off. It's amazing. It just happens. You can have less pollution by turning lights off. You can engineer things to be quieter. You can be aware of what some of the sounds we have is doing to the broader environment. So there's a lot in the invitation here about the original purpose of Earth Day, which was about paying attention. Kim and I are going to wrap up by each sharing a few lessons we're hoping that you might think about. The first thing I wanted to share is if we think and we understand the planet a little bit different, what motivates us to care? It's easy to get all exercised about climate change and to be fearful and to be scared. But what is it that motivates you personally and motivates us collectively to care? The Unitarian Universalist Ministry for Earth, it's the group who focus their attention on environmental justice. Here's what their tagline is, and I think the sequence they use is important. Respect life, restore earth, renew spirit. Respect life, restore earth, renew spirit. They talk a lot about global justice and environmental justice, and they recognize that those who cause the most damage are not the ones who pay the price. It's the people in the poorest areas, often people of color, that are paying the price. So it all comes together. But they don't start with restore earth. They start with respect life. It reminds us of our mutuality. So my second thought is I know when we get scared, people tend to do, they used to say you either had flight or fight or flight, and then they introduced freeze. I think sometimes we are in that place with climate change because we're scared. It's overwhelming. And what might we do if we take our faith, into our hearts as we look at these problems? Where might there be creative solutions around light or sound or the other problems that we're still working through if we start with a bit less fear and at least an honoring of where we are in the midst of it all? Because I don't think problems get solved in flight or, keep getting it mixed up. Flight or fight. Freeze just always comes to my mind. I think I but I think we are living in a place, and I think that's an important thing as I reflected on Earth Day, where we live in this model of fear. And that comes to my final lesson, and then Kim's got a couple for you. I spend a lot of time pastorally asking myself what's in my control and what's not. What's in my control and what's not. And as I looked in the immense world, as I looked at all the biodiversity and things that are in control of other animals that are different than I am, I think that phrase asks us to remember we're not to fret and worry, but to be a bit more gentle with ourselves. And that's not to say not to work hard on climate change, not to work on the policies, not to work on the behavior changes, but to recognize if we stay in a whir of fear and fret, we're probably not going to make a difference. Maybe if we suspend a bit and let the creative teachings of all these animals come through, we might come up with creative solutions we've never thought of before. So Kim's going to wrap up our Earth Day message with a few other thoughts.
I think I really only have one main thing to say, but I want to say, Sue, that I appreciate so much two things that you said today. One is paying attention. If we're paying attention and putting ourselves in the shoes of others, I think that's really important. And then this idea of respect life, restore earth, renew spirit. One of our principles is the idea of respecting all life, and not just human life. And I think if we do that one thing through our paying attention and putting ourselves in the shoes of others, that the restoring earth and renewing spirit will follow. Because if we respect someone, we treat them that way, and that makes big change. I appreciate the walking away from fear today and into hope and faith as we're, traversing our environmental issues. So, thank you.
And thanks to those who 53 years ago came up with this idea. And our closing hymn today is hymn number 203, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky. Please rise and bow your spirit.
Come
minutes and to make sure we have time for our lovely postlude, we're going to have discussion during coffee hour. I close with the blessings for this earth, the recognition of interconnection, and the recognition that our care matters. I invite us to now extinguish the flame together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of community fire. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
So this last song is an Irish Demit song. I became an Irish Demit fan at a Unitarian church in the 80s when someone sang her song, Let the Mystery Be. I'm sure many of you know that song. She has a new record out and I encourage you to get it. It's very political. I didn't realize how this song might fit with the service today, but it does, based on the comments at the end about each other. And I'm going to ask you to sing along too. Home's become such an angry place, friends now wear an enemy's face, the chasms grown so wide. Words of wisdom from a different time, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. The same is true today. We drown in ill will, or we swallow the pill. Go on and say a good word to them now. Your part. Repeat after me. Say a good word. 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 Nobody gets everything right. Shine your love light. Go on and say a good word to them now. Life is so hard. Who isn't scarred? Go on and say a good word to them now. It's different this time. Magnanimity, magnanimity. Oh. You can just sing it with me now. Magnanimity, magnanimity. Oh. It's not too late. Don't hesitate. Go on and say a good word to them now. Say
Go in love and have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Let's take out.